came first, sharp, flat, the particular ugly crack of an open palm against a woman's face. It hit the marble ceiling and came back down, changed, louder for having bounced. Bold earring detached and fell, hit the floor, made a sound like a pin dropping in a cathedral. The lobby went quiet in stages. The way quiet spreads when something crosses a line that everyone present recognizes, even if no one names it. Phones rose. 4, 5, 6, people recording without entirely knowing why, only knowing that something had happened that needed to be witnessed. The man in the black suit adjusted his cuff. The woman he had struck did not fall, did not cry out, make a single sound. She stood, hand still holding her phone, blood at the corner of her mouth. What she noticed, in that strange slowed clarity certain moments bring, was not the pain, though the pain was real and spreading. What she noticed was his face, not fury, not the faces of a man who had lost control of himself. Calculation. His eyes had moved to the security camera on the column across the lobby. He had looked at it before he hit her. He knew exactly where it was, and he had done it anyway. My father wore his best suit the night they turned us away. Navy blue, pressed the evening before. He had done everything right. It still wasn't enough. That's where this story begins. Not in a boardroom, not in a lobby. Backseat of a 1968 Pontiac on a highway outside Savannah, Georgia, where an 8-year-old girl watched her father's hands grip a steering wheel in the dark and understood, for the first time, that some doors close for reasons no one will ever say out loud. The summer of 1971 was brutal in Georgia, the kind of heat that made the road shimmer and the air taste like copper. Arthur Caldwell had been driving since morning. Literature professor, Morris, Brown College, a man who quoted Langston Hughes before breakfast and James Baldwin before bed and believed, with everything in him, that language was the one thing no one could take from you. Packed the car the night before, both her brothers in the back, her mother with a road map open on her lap, because that was how you traveled then, before GPS, before anything that told you where you were going with certainty. Vivian had stayed awake the whole drive, watching the highway lights blur past, counting gas stations, listening to the radio fade in and out between stations. The Whitmore Inn appeared out of the dark. 2 stories, white shutters, a parking lot half full with Buicks and Oldsmobiles belonging to families who had found their rooms without trouble. Front a sign, vacancy, green neon, humming softly in the Georgia night. Her father pulled in, turned off the engine. For exactly 1 moment, with his hand still on the wheel, just 1 moment, then he straightened his jacket, ran a hand across his tie, and stepped out. Shoulders back, head level, the walk of a man who had spent 43 years refusing to be made small. Her mother reached back and squeezed Vivian's knee without turning around. 2 minutes, maybe 3. The door opened, and her father walked back out. Same posture, same stride, same suit pressed carefully the night before. But something in the set of his jaw, something around his eyes that Vivian had never seen before and would spend the rest of her life trying to understand. Back in the car. No vacancy? Her mother asked Lee.
Already knowing.
No vacancy, he said. Outside, the green sign kept humming. Vacancy, still lit, still glowing, still telling its lie to the Georgia night. Her father started the car. They pulled back onto the highway. No one said another word for a very long time. Both her brothers were asleep before they'd gone 10 miles. Her mother's head tipped against the window. The radio gave up somewhere past midnight, but Vivian stayed awake. She watched her father drive, watched his profile against the passing dark, the strong jaw, the glasses he only wore when he thought no one was looking. The way he stared at the road like it had done something to him personally, and he was deciding very carefully what to do about it. He never cried, he never raged, he just drove. And Vivian, 8 years old, in the back seat of a car that was going to be their bed for the night, made a decision she couldn't have named yet. Landed in her chest the way stones land in still water. Quiet, heavy, permanent. She was going to build a door. A door that opened for everyone, without conditions. She chose a taxi, not the town car, not the assistant's car. Anything that could be traced back to her schedule by someone paying close attention to her movements. Just a taxi, called from a number she didn't use for anything else to us, driven by a man who didn't recognize her and had no reason to. Vivian Caldwell was 62 years old. She was the founder and CEO of Caldwell Hospitality Group, 14 properties across 9 states. A company she had built from a folding table in a law office that doubled as a dentist's waiting room on Tuesdays. A company that bore her family name and her father's memory and everything she had decided that night in the back seat of a Pontiac. She wore a navy blue dress, small rolling suitcase, the reservation in the system under the name V. Carter, because 41 complaints had landed on her desk in the past 12 months. 41, all from guests at the Caldwell Grand, her flagship, the hotel she had designed herself, down to the angle of the atrium light and the weight of the towels and the temperature of the marble underfoot. Hotel with her family name on the face of the building in gold letters, 2 feet tall, visible 6 blocks in any direction. 41 complaints, everyone marked resolved in the system, not one person disciplined, not one follow-up call placed to the guest who filed it. One explanation given to anyone. She had asked about it. Twice, through proper channels in meetings with people who nodded and said the situation was being monitored. She knew what being monitored meant. It meant nothing. It meant the person across the table needed her to stop asking. So she stopped asking and started showing up instead. She had done this before, 5 years ago in Chicago, 3 days as an ordinary guest before she signed the closure order. Manager who'd overseen that property still didn't entirely understand what had happened, which was by design. You learned more when people didn't know you were learning. But this was different from Chicago. This was the Caldwell Grand. Her father's name on the door. The taxi stopped. She looked up at the building, tall, glass and stone, the entrance framed in dark bronze, and there, high above the street, in letters that turned the September morning's sun into something gold and definite, the Caldwell Grand. She stood on the sidewalk for 3 seconds. Then she picked up her suitcase and walked through the door. The lobby was exactly what she had designed it to be. Soaring, warm, natural light pouring down through the atrium she had argued for in 3 separate contractor meetings, against 3 separate men who thought she was being impractical. She had won every argument. The light was worth every one of them. Marble floors, fresh flowers near the concierge desk. The low-layered sound of a hotel morning, luggage wheels, distant conversation, the soft ding of elevator doors, all of it calibrated. All of it intentional. All of it built to make a person feel, the moment they stepped inside, that they had arrived somewhere that expected them. Was the idea. That was always the idea. She crossed to the front desk. Brixton Hale was 26 years old with a name tag worn slightly off-center on his lapel, just enough to suggest he'd put it on in the elevator. The careful posture of someone trained to stand a certain way, not someone who had grown into it naturally. Was a difference if you knew how to look. He looked at Vivian, then at his screen. The sequence of it, deliberate in a way that probably wasn't conscious. Probably, at that please, and a credit card for incidentals. She placed them on the counter. He typed, frowned at the screen in the particular way that precedes a complication. Do you have a second form of identification? She kept her voice even. I have a reservation. The confirmation number's in the system. Flat, like she'd confirmed something of minor interest. But we require a second form for security purposes. Security purposes. At the counter directly to her left, a clerk was helping a couple check in. White, late 50s. Rust, but not unusually so. No second form of identification requested. No frown at the screen. Just warmth and the easy question of whether they'd prefer a park view or the city skyline. Vivian noted the difference, cataloged it, did not react to it. She produced her passport without a word. She was midway through explaining the double charge, a legitimate billing discrepancy she'd identified before arriving, chosen as the reason for the conversation, when the energy in the lobby shifted. Dramatically, just a change in the air. The kind that happens when someone enters who believes the space rearranges itself for them. Derek Stanton moved through the lobby the way water moves downhill, 47 years old, black suit without a wrinkle in it. A Rolex on his left wrist that caught light at almost every angle, cologne that announced his arrival before he did. He came around behind the counter with the ease of most money had never once been asked to go around. 15 years at this property. Nephew of Richard Stanton, one of the founding shareholders who had brought capital to Vivian's table in 1996 when she was building on belief and borrowed time and had needed money badly enough to share control she'd later spend years trying to reclaim. Problem here, not a question, a rival. I was explaining a billing discrepancy, Vivian said. My account was charged twice for the same night. I'm sure you've misunderstood our rate structure. He didn't look at her when he said it, eyes on the screen. Conversation already, in his estimation, beneath his attention. We're quite clear about our pricing. The rate isn't the issue. Same night was charged twice. That's a billing error. Now he looked at her, slow, head tilting just slightly. The look of a man's deciding how much of his patience to spend on a problem he's already categorized. Ma'am. One syllable, a whole language compressed inside it. I have managed luxury properties for 15 years. Our billing system does not make errors. Billing systems makes errors, not this one. Then you won't mind pulling up the account and showing me. Something moved across his face then. Not anger, not quite. Something more controlled than anger. Something that had been decided before he walked over. Our rates are presenting a challenge, he said, and the smile that arrived with it was the kind that had nothing warm in it. I'd be happy to suggest some alternative properties in the area that might be more. A pause, timed and shaped deliberately, comfortable for you. Vivian looked at him, just looked, the way you look at something when you need to be absolutely certain you're seeing it accurately. When the implications of being right are going to cost something significant and you need to be sure before you spend it. Less like to speak with someone in authority, she said, his smile spread. You're looking at him. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone. His hand came across the counter before she'd raised the screen, fingers around her wrist, grip firm enough to be a statement. Calling anyone from this lobby, the lobby, warm, light-filled, built to make everyone feel they belonged, went quiet. All at once, in stages, the way quiet spreads when something crosses a line that everyone present recognizes, even if no one names it. Take your hand off me. No performance in it, no tremor, just the words, placed exactly where they needed to be. And then he came around the counter. She didn't step back, didn't raise her hands, didn't give him a single inch of ground. 'Cause stepping back would have meant something. Would have meant she believed he had the right to make her move. The slap landed across her left cheek, sharp and flat and ugly. It hit the marble ceiling and came back down changed, louder, somehow, for having bounced. A gunshot in an empty church. Vivian didn't fall, didn't cry out, didn't make a sound. She stood, hand still holding her phone. What she noticed, in the strange slowed clarity that certain moments bring, when the body goes very still and the mind goes very sharp, was not the pain, though the pain was real and spreading, and eyes were trying to respond against her will. What she noticed was his face, not fury on it, not the face of a man who had lost control of himself. Calculation. His eyes moved, just for a fraction of a second, quick and practiced, to the security camera on a column across the lobby. Column 3. She had approved the placement of every camera in this building herself. He'd looked at it before he hit her. Exactly where it was. And he'd done it anyway. A small gold earring, shaped like a flower, the kind her mother had given her years ago, detached and fell. Hit the marble and made a sound like a pin dropping in a cathedral. In the silence of the lobby, it was the sharpest sound she had ever heard. She became aware of things in sequence. Phones going up. 4, 5, 6. People recording without entirely knowing why, only knowing that something had happened that needed to be witnessed. Brixton Hale behind the desk, hands frozen on the keyboard, face the color of old paper. The looks of someone who is learning, in real time, the full distance between knowing something is wrong and having to watch it happen. A child somewhere behind her started to ask a question and was hushed immediately, and then movement. From the left. From the direction of the concierge desk. Slow, deliberate. The movement of someone who has made a decision and is not reversing it. Rosa Mae Jenkins was 67 years old and had worked at this hotel since 1989. Started as a housekeeper at 32. Built her way to head of housekeeping through 35 years of consistent, undeniable work, the kind that gets rewarded with more responsibility and almost never with title or pay to match it. She walked with a hitch in her right leg, an injury from 2008, a wet floor, a fall that should never have happened, a subsequent incident report that management filed without consulting her, which recorded the floor as properly marked and attributed the fall to her own failure of caution. Rosa Mae had the original signage requisition records. The signs had been ordered the day after she fell. She had fought for 11 months through proper channels and won something small enough to feel like an insult dressed as a settlement. She'd stayed anyway, because this was her place. Even when it treated her like she didn't matter, it was still her place. Then she'd outlasted 4 general managers and 2 ownership transitions and 1 complete lobby renovation. She knew every corner of this building the way you know the house you grew up in. She crossed the lobby floor without hurrying, stopped beside Vivian, didn't ask if she was all right, didn't say anything at all. Stood there, like a tree that had chosen its ground. Derek Stanton looked at her, then looked away, then looked back, something uncertain crossing his face for the first time since he'd walked over. Expected a different kind of aftermath, some collapse, some scene that would read a certain way on footage. Planned for this standing, this absolute, unhurried standing. Vivian pressed the call button. Desmond Webb picked up in 2 rings. He heard something in her voice before she said a word. What happened, he said. Not a question. At 9:47 this morning, the on-duty manager at the Caldwell Grand, Derek Stanton, grabbed Ruett and attempted to make a phone call. When I asked him to release me, he came around the desk and struck me across the face. Full lobby. Multiple people recording. Very short silence. Jesus, Vivian, I need the following in this order. Lock Stanton's access card. Building entry, elevators, all staff areas. Contact security directly. We have 17 cameras in this building. Every angle from the past 3 hours pulled, duplicated, and stored off-site within 10 minutes. Get Diana on the line. Already moving. Don't call me back until you have confirmation on all 17 feeds. She ended the call, looked at Derek Stanton, who was watching her with something new on his face, the first tremor of understanding. Calculation catching up with itself. She didn't give him the satisfaction of watching her react to it. I need every on-duty staff member in this lobby. Right now, 3 short bells rang through the building, the staff announcement signal. People in from wherever they were within 4 minutes. They came from kitchens and housekeeping corridors, and the business center and the loading dock. Different uniforms, different departments, all of them gathering in the lobbies in uncertain clothes, looking at each other, looking at her, looking at the mark on her cheek that was already telling its own story. Some recognized her immediately. Rosa May, who had known from the moment Vivian walked through the door, an older maintenance man from the Chicago opening. 2 others from the orientation training she had led personally 3 years ago. Others didn't know yet. She let them wonder exactly as long as it took to find the words. For those who don't recognize me, my name is Dr. Vivian Caldwell. I'm the founder and CEO of Caldwell Hospitality Group. This hotel was named after my father. He deserved to have his name on a door that would never close without reason. Not a sound. 9 minutes ago, your manager struck me across the face in this lobby. It is not an isolated event. Property has received 41 complaints of discriminatory treatment in the past 12 months. Every single one was marked resolved. One person was held accountable. Some looked away. Some stared with the defiance of people caught in something they'd told themselves was normal. A few of the older ones, people who had Rosa May's context, nodded, very slightly, the nod of people waiting for something to finally be said out loud. Immediately, this property is closed for civil rights review. All on-duty staff are suspended pending individual HR review. Those who were not complicit have nothing to fear. Those who were already know. Derek Stanton opened his mouth. She looked at him. He closed it. The lobby emptied in stages. Corporate security arrived. Desmond's people, not building guards Derek had authority over. Guests were redirected to other properties. The careful, professional dismantling of an ordinary hotel morning. Rosa May didn't leave. She waited near the concierge desk until the room settled, then crossed to Vivian and held out a handkerchief. Pressed, yellow embroidery at the edge. Vivian pressed it to her cheek. Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. I kept records, Rosa May said quietly. Between them, 35 years of it, I wrote it all down thinking maybe someday is today, Vivian said. Rosa May nodded once. Then she straightened and went to help coordinate the last of the staff departure. The town car came 40 minutes later. Different service. Nothing that could be traced back to her regular schedule. She walked through the lobby one last time. Past the flower arrangements, past the light fixtures, past everything she had built. She walked out through the bronze-framed doors and stood on the sidewalk. Up the Caldwell Grand, her father's name, 2 feet tall, gold, catching the September sun. If it get back to the street, doubled. 3 seconds. She gave herself exactly 3, felt the full weight of the morning, the sting still moving across her cheek, the earring on the marble, her father's hands tight on a steering wheel 53 years ago, the green vacancy sign still glowing somewhere in her memory. 53 years. She had built this and stood in the middle of it and decided she was still the kind of woman you could put your hands on. She got in the car. The driver didn't speak. He didn't know her from anyone. They pulled into traffic, and in that back seat behind tinted glass, Vivian Caldwell let her shoulders come down from where she had been holding them. One movement, through her back and into her hands, then gone. She straightened, picked up her phone, and went to work. The call came before the light did. Vivian was already up, standing at the kitchen window with coffee gone cold in her hand, watching the Atlanta skyline hold its shape against the last of the night. She had been standing there for an hour, not pacing, not planning, just standing the way you stand when your body needs to be vertical, but your mind hasn't finished with the previous day yet. The bruise had settled overnight to something with its own weight. She'd looked at it in the bathroom mirror at 4 in the morning, which was when she'd stopped pretending. Sleep was a possibility. 2 fingers against it, gently, noted it, moved on. Her phone lit up. Carolyn Hargrove. Vivian looked at the name for exactly 1 ring. She answered. Carolyn had chaired the Caldwell Hospitality Board for 9 years. She had sat beside Vivian at 12 industry ceremonies, 4 crisis sessions, and 1 very long dinner in Washington, where a senator said something that required enormous self-control to leave unanswered. Night, Carolyn had placed her hand over Vivian's under the table and murmured, "Not here, not tonight," and Vivian had understood it as solidarity, as the gesture of a woman who saw what was happening and wanted Vivian to know she saw it. She was understanding it differently now. "Not," Carolyn began. "Not Dr. Caldwell, not are you hurt, not I saw the footage and I am furious. We need to talk about optics." Something in Vivian's chest went very still, not surprised, just registering. The way you register something you half expected and fully dreaded. Filing it in the part of her mind that had been cataloging similar moments since she was 8 years old in the back seat of a Pontiac on a Georgia highway. "I'm listening," Vivian said. "The Stanton family retained counsel last night. Richard called 3 board members before 9 o'clock. A pause. The surgical kind. They're characterizing the staff's suspensions as retaliatory, emotionally driven. There's concern among certain shareholders about the optics of a CEO removing an entire shift of employees over being assaulted. Or a confrontation that, Carolyn, not loud, just placed with precision, the way you place something you don't want moved. Me, in my own lobby, on camera, multiple people recorded it. Silence on the line, not agreement. Apology. Just silence, doing the work that honesty was apparently too expensive to do this morning. The silence of someone who has chosen a position and is holding it with both hands. "We need you to consider stepping back temporarily," Carolyn said. She had moved into a register Vivian knew, the diplomatic register, the one trained to make terrible suggestions sound like reasonable ones. "Just while we manage this carefully. A brief pause while the board convenes a proper review. It would allow things to, I'll be in the boardroom at 9. Vivian set the phone on the counter, picked up the cold coffee, drank it anyway. Outside, the Atlanta skyline was beginning to catch the first gray of morning. Somewhere in it, 10 blocks east, the roofline of the Caldwell Grand was becoming visible, the particular angle of its upper floors that she had specified in the architectural drawings and argued for in 2 separate city planning hearings. Her father's name up there in gold, waiting for the sun to reach it. She stood at the window until the light came. Then she went to get dressed. 47 missed calls. She found them when she picked up her phone again, after the shower, after the charcoal suit, after she stood in front of the bathroom mirror and made the decision about the bruise in under 5 seconds. No concealer. Let it be visible. Let it be in every room she walked into today and do its work. Turned on the television, and there she was, on the screen, standing in the lobby of the Caldwell Grand. Navy blue dress, 1 earring, her voice carrying across the marble floor as she addressed the assembled staff. The lower third, Chiron read, "CEO conducts racially charged tirade before mass firing. Exclusive footage." Except the footage was a lie. It started wrong, started after Derek's hand around her wrist, after the slap, the earring hitting the floor and the lobby holding its breath. What was on screen now was just Vivian, standing speaking, but her voice had been adjusted, just slightly, just enough, pitched a degree higher than reality so that composed became shrill and deliberate became uncontrolled. Underneath it, background music that her lobby had never contained, low and ominous, doing the work that the actual footage refused to do. Hashtag already trending nationally, unhinged CEO. Number 2, climbing fast. Vivian stood in her living room and watched herself become a different person on television. 30 years of careful, intentional construction. The company, the reputation, the name on the door, get trimmed and scored and captioned into a story about an angry woman who had finally revealed what she really was. Turned off the TV, sat on the edge of the couch, put her hands flat on her thighs, breathed in. Then she called Simone Fletcher. Simone answered on the first ring. "I'm at the office," she said before Vivian could speak. "Come now." Simone Fletcher was 59 years old, with close-cropped hair silvering at the temples and the particular quality of someone who had spent 30 years in civils law and had long since moved past surprise into something more useful, a steady, clear-eyed readiness that didn't perform urgency but contained enormous quantities of it. She opened her office door before Vivian finished knocking. One look at the bruise, jaw tight. She pulled Vivian into a hug, brief, fierce. Someone who has known you for 25 years and is choosing to express fury as warmth because that's what the moment requires. She stepped back, looked at Vivian the way a surgeon looks at a situation they've been preparing to address. "Wasn't a man losing his temper," Simone said. "I know. This was constructed. The question is how far back the construction goes. It's what I need you to find out. Already started. She turned back into the office. Come in. Shut the door. The office was a working space rather than an impressive one. Documents organized in a system that looked chaotic and was not. Two laptops simultaneously, a whiteboard along one wall already carrying the beginning of a timeline that Simone had built overnight. Fruit-free. September VC flags 41 complaints to board. No action taken. The most recent read Tuesday 9:47. Assault. Lobby footage secured. Between those 2 points, a web of arrows and dates and names that Vivian hadn't seen assembled before but recognized in its architecture as the shape of something she had been living inside for longer than she'd known. She sat across from Simone, said almost nothing for 4 hours, because this was the thing about knowing someone for 25 years. You knew when to talk and when to let them work, and Simone was working. At 11:43, she looked up. Harrington Capital, she said. Vivian waited. Private equity. Boston. They've been in quiet negotiations with the family for 9 months. Simone turned her laptop around. The screen showed a chain of subsidiary registrations, dry, technical, the kind of documents that were technically public and practically is invisible because finding them required patience and specific knowledge of where to look. Preliminary term sheet isn't filed anywhere, obvious. But the trail exists in business registrations attached to 3 holding entities, 2 of which list members of the Aston family as officers. Vivian leaned forward. The document was dense with the language that corporate agreements use to say important things in ways designed to limit accountability. The highlighted line cut through all of it with the clarity of plain English. Leadership transition as condition of close. She read it twice. They want someone more. Simone paused, choosing the word the way she chose all words in professional contexts, with surgical precision. Transactional. A CEO who optimizes revenue and doesn't treat the company's values as operational constraints. They want me gone. They've wanted you gone for 9 months. And family agreed to deliver that. They just needed a mechanism, an incident that could be shaped into cause. Simone closed the laptop. Derek Stanton did not hit you because he lost control of himself. He hit you because the situation required a confrontation, something that could be documented, edited, and deployed as evidence that you were unstable. Someone the board had a fiduciary responsibility to remove. The room was quiet. The video, Vivian said, was ready before you arrived. Simply, the way you say something when the evidence is solid and the implications are enormous since you have decided to let the fact carry its own weight rather than dramatizing it. Vivian sat with it. The slap had not been Derek losing himself. It had been Derek performing a function, a specific planned function with a specific planned aftermath, which meant he had known she was going, which meant the 41 complaints that had been marked resolved without investigation had not just been negligence, they had been preparation. Creating conditions, waiting. Someone in my circle told them I was coming, Vivian said. That investigation is secondary to what we're building right now. We have enough without it. Simone picked up her pen. The question is what we do next, and in what order. Tell me about Article 7. 2 associates worked alongside them through the afternoon. Marcus Obi had been with Simone's firm for 6 years. The kind of researcher who found documents the people had concluded were unfindable, not through drama but through patience and a thorough understanding of how corporate record-keeping actually worked. Spent the morning in subsidiary registration databases and emerged with 17 pages of cross-referenced filings. Petra Wash was the firm's digital forensics specialist. 28 years old, quiet in the way of someone always thinking 3 steps ahead, she had come to Simone's practice 4 years ago from a federal cybercrime unit. Put her laptop on the table, without preamble. The edited clip was created at 11:47 p.m. Monday night, she said. Before Dr. Caldwell arrived at the hotel, file creations, timestamps, editing, software signature, export settings, all embedded in the metadata, whether or not the people who made it understood that. She scrolled. The first accounts to distribute it share a registered business address with a holding company listing 2 members of the Stanton family as officers. Distribution began at 6:14 Tuesday morning. The table was quiet. Vivian looked at the timestamps. The slap had happened at 9:47 a.m. Tuesday. The video documenting her response had been created at 11:47 p.m. Monday, 10 hours before the slap. The plan had not reacted to the incident. The incident had been the plan. Tell me what you need for Article 7, Vivian said. Simone set down her pen. Article 7, Section 12, Civil Rights Provision. Documented evidence establishes a pattern of racial discrimination at any property, and if that evidence implicates shareholders or board members in perpetrating or concealing it, the CEO can call a special shareholder vote to suspend the voting rights of any complicit party. What counts as documented evidence? Complaint records showing a demonstrable pattern. Internal communications directing discriminatory practices. Corporate knowledge combined with failure to act. Simone picked up her pen again. Rosa May's notebooks alone constitute significant evidence. The 2019 memo establishes board-level knowledge. Brixton Hale's communications established directed practice at management level. Together, a case I'd take into federal court. Desmond Webb arrived at 2:30. 2 hours of sleep, 6 hours of work visible on his face. All 17 camera feeds from 6 a.m. through noon Tuesday, duplicated to 3 secure servers, 2 off-site. Signed confirmation from all 3 facilities, timestamped before 9 this morning. Document on the table. Stanton's system access was terminated at 10:14. He attempted to log back in at 10:22. The system logged the failed attempt automatically. He tried to access the footage, didn't get in, but the attempt is time-stamped and unalterable. A second document, his incident report. Filed at 11:55 Tuesday morning. Vivian rated, physical intervention. Phrase for striking her across the face in her own lobby. Have filed this before the edited video was distributed, Marcus said. The paper trail and the media narrative were constructed simultaneously. Together they were meant to create a story with 2 independent sources. The video's metadata proves the emotional narrative predates the incident it claims to document. Vivi set the report down. She thought about her father, not the highway, but a Saturday morning when she was 11. He had looked up from grading papers and said without preamble, "The people who have always had power don't fight fair. Don't have to. So you have to fight smart. You have to build things they don't know how to dismantle." Been 11 and understood it imperfectly. She was 62 and had built Article 7 for exactly this reason. 4 o'clock, Rosa May Jenkins arrived. Church clothes, navy skirt, cream blouse, a small magnolia brooch, 6 notebooks out of the canvas bag, different sizes, all of them dense, with the same careful handwriting. Across from Vivian and folded her hands on the table. Neither of them spoke for a moment. June 1989, Rosa May said, opening the oldest notebook. A family turned away from a room I knew was available because I'd cleaned it that morning. I wrote it down. Kept writing after that. Every complaint that disappeared, every person treated differently from the guest who checked in right before them. How many incidents total? I stopped counting after 240. That was SIST 11. I kept writing. I just stopped counting. Stanton arrived 2009. Promoted to manager in 2012. Before him, the discrimination was ambient. Things that happened because no one prevented them. For 2012, there were instructions, not in any policy document, but communicated clearly enough that everyone understood. She slid the 4th notebook toward Marcus. One covers 2014 through 2018. Tabbed section, document guest complaints I watched being filed, then watched disappear. I wrote down every reference number. Guest name, what they reported. Check back 2 weeks later. Everyone was closed. Resolution code. No investigation. No contact with the guest. All the reference numbers, Simone said. All of them. And the guest names. All of them. Simone set down her pen, the gesture of someone who rarely stopped writing during working conversations. In 31 years of civil rights law, she said, I have occasionally seen documents changes the shape of a case entirely. Look, she looked at the 6 notebooks. This is that. Something settled in Rosa May's face, a long-held tension releasing. Reached back into the canvas bag and placed one more item, a single sheet, folded in thirds, the creases worn smooth from years of handling. I found this in 2020. I was searching for maintenance logs from 2017 in the records room. It was misfiled between 2 housekeeping inventory reports from 2018. Whether that was deliberate or accidental, she shrugged. The equanimity of someone who had stopped expecting those 2 things to be meaningfully different, I can't say. He unfolded it. A memo. March 14th, hotel letterhead. From Robert Franklin, then general manager, to corporate compliance. 5 paragraphs, specific and measured. The language of a man who knew this document would face scrutiny and had written it to survive. Documented a pattern of discriminatory guest treatment under Derek Stanton's management. Named incidents, cited dates, included complaint reference numbers for cases filed and closed without investigation. Final paragraph. This pattern constitutes a systematic violation of the company's stated values and, I believe, applicable civil rights statutes. I am reporting through official channels with the expectation of investigation at the corporate level. At the bottom, received and reviewed. Carolyn Hargrove, Board Chair, March 21, 2019. Vivian read it once. Read it again. Set it on the table. She knew, Vivian said. She knew, Simone said, not as confirmation, as the closing of something. Vivian walked to the window, stood looking at the city. The quiet sex sounds of people working. Marcus cataloging, Petra typing, Simone writing again. She let herself feel the full size of it. Just Carolyn, the system behind it. The memo misfiled for a year. The 17 complaints Rosa May had filed, all resolved. The 41 in the past year alone. The edited video ready before she arrived. All of it connected with run simultaneously in different corridors for a very long time. Her father, in a navy blue suit, told there was no vacancy while the sign said otherwise. Different building, same door. She turned around. What do we need to do tonight to be ready in 48 hours? Simone looked at her. She said, let's start. Brixton had not slept. He'd spent the night on his couch, scrolling through the staff group chat with the hollow feelings of someone watching their own choices from a slight distance. He'd muted it at 4 p.m., unmuted it at 9 because the silence felt worse. Then he actually read it, not skimming, actually reading, letting each message be what it was. Posting from his personal phone, narrating the edited videos spread across platforms with the satisfaction of someone watching something they built function as designed. The language he used about Vivian was not dramatic. That would have been easier to dismiss. It was casual. Ordinary. The language of a man to whom this view was so normal it hadn't required a decision. Brixton thought about his grandmother. 81 years old, 42 years cleaning hotel rooms. She'd come home with the same stories in different settings, of being talked through rather than of the smile that was part of the uniform, worn home and then carefully set down because it didn't belong there. Told him, keep your head down. Don't make waves. That's how you keep a job, baby. He had tried. But it was 2 in the morning and he was thinking about every instruction he had processed in the past 2 years that hadn't sat right, and every time he had found a way to process it anyway. Found his bag. The USB drive was in the interior pocket, put there Monday afternoon before the corporate security team arrived, before anyone thought to secure the front desk workstation. Not a plan, an instinct. The instinct of someone paying enough attention to know that when important people arrive, useful information starts to disappear. Opened his laptop, copied the staff group chat archive. 8 months of messages, automatically stored in the hotel's system, containing dozens of Derek's communications that no functioning HR department would have accepted, and that HR had never seen because Derek controlled who saw what. Email chain from February. Derek, in a company email, writing guidance about managing certain guests in terms that existed nowhere in official policy, but which everyone who received them understood immediately. The raw security footage, all 17 cameras, us and edited, time-stamped. His hands were not entirely steady. They kept moving anyway, he thought. There are choices that don't feel like choices because the alternative seems impossible. Until you understand the alternative was always available. It just had a cost. The question is what you're paying for. He finished at 3:49 a.m. His grandmother had also said once, sitting on her front steps when he was 12, not seeming to mean much by it. The ones who never make waves, baby. You know what happens to still water? It goes bad. He looked at the USB drive on the table. They texted Simone Fletcher's direct line at 3:52 a.m. My name is Brixton Hale. I was on duty at the front desk when Dr. Caldwell arrived Tuesday morning. Footage, internal communications, and documentation. Please tell me where to meet. The reply came at 5:18, Wednesday. A.m. my office. Bring everything. He put the USB drive in his jacket pocket, made coffee, waited for the city to wake up. Board room had floor-to-ceiling windows on the east side that filled the space with morning light between 8 and 10. Vivian had not engineered this. She'd found the building, recognized what the light did to the room, and made her decision accordingly. She had always believed that a room where people made important decisions should have good light. Bad decisions were easier to make in the dark. Called Frank at 8:59, charcoal suit, hair back, the bruise uncovered and visible and not apologized for in any way. Simone to her right, Desmond to her left. Carolyn Hargrove at the head of the table, silver hair precisely arranged. A cream blouse, the composure of someone who has spent decades building composure the way other people build careers, methodically, with full awareness of its value as a professional asset. 6 lawyers along the wall, the Stanton family's counsel arranged with the comfortable positioning of people who believe they are in the room to observe the conclusion of something rather than participate in its reversal. When everyone was settled, Carolyn began. The language had been prepared. Vivian could hear the preparation in it, the careful, specific gravity of phrases chosen in advance, each one doing a particular job. Significant liability, stakeholder confidence, narrative stabilization, the importance of measured and decisive leadership during institutional vulnerability. Phrases that meant everything to people who needed them to mean something and left no fingerprints for anyone who came looking later. The word assault did not appear. Derek Stanton's name did not appear. Just the numbers, just the damage, the 18% drop in pre-market trading. The conference contracts under review. The 3 institutional shareholders who had called Carolyn personally to express concern. He extends the circumstances, Carolyn said, on arriving at what all of the preceding 12 minutes had been building toward. The board believes it would be in the company's best interest for you to step back temporarily. Just while we navigate this period carefully, until the situation, until what? 2 words, placed with the same absolute stillness that had stood in the lobby after the slap and given nothing. Carolyn's composure held, a remarkable performance, Vivian thought, even now, until the situation has stabilized. The situation, Vivian said, that a man struck me in my own building on camera, and the board's primary concern is whether I'm creating inconvenient optics. She looked around the table slowly. The way you look when you need each person in a room to understand they are being seen clearly. I want to make sure I understand that correctly before we proceed. The public narrative is a fabrication. She placed the metadata analysis on the table and slid it toward the center. The edited video was created the night before I arrived at the hotel. Here is the file creation timestamp. Here is the editing software signature. Here is the distribution trail connecting the first accounts to proposed withholding entities that list members of the Stanton family as officers. A lawyer along the wall shifted. Carolyn's eyes moved to the document. Simone placed a second document beside the first. Memo, March 14, 2019, 5 paragraphs. Robert Franklin's careful, specific language, and at the bottom of the page, received and reviewed. Carolyn Hargrove, board chair. March 21, 2019. Carolyn looked at it. The room looked at Carolyn looking at it. The silence lasted 4 seconds. Vivian counted them. I also have, for the record, Simone's voice trust, the flat professional instrument of a woman who has argued in federal court and knows exactly she's doing with every word. 35 years of documented incident records, compiled by a current employee of this company. A digital forensics analysis of the edited video establishing both its fraudulent construction, its connection to the Stanton family. Internal communications directing discriminatory practices at the management level, and a recording, voluntarily provided by a former on-duty employee, of a front desk workstation being instructed on how to apply those practices without triggering the formal complaint system. She let that sit. We are prepared to present all of this evidence at a special shareholder meeting, which Dr. Caldwell is calling under Article 7, Section 12 of the Caldwell Hospitality Founding Agreement. The room changed, not dramatically. Subtly, the way a room changes when everyone in it simultaneously understands that the meeting they thought they were attending is not the MAVE that is actually happening. Family's lead counsel, a man named Garrett, gray-haired, the kind of polished that comes from decades of being well compensated to be the smartest person available, leaned forward and said, with the controlled urgency of someone trying to sound calm, Article 7, Section 12 has never been invoked. Its applicability is established by the language of the provision itself, Simone said, which was reviewed and approved by 3 separate legal teams in 1998, reaffirmed in the 2007 corporate restructuring, and reaffirmed again in the 2014 restructuring. Provision stands. The vote can be called. Garrett glanced at the Stanton family representatives, 2 of them seated beside him, Richard Stanton's chosen proxies for this morning's meeting. One of them was already on his phone, thumb moving fast. The board will still need to proceed with the confidence vote, Carolyn said. Her voice had not changed. That was the most remarkable thing about her, Vivian thought, even now, the discipline of it. Trained, absolute steadiness of a person who understood that composure was power and had never once let herself lose it in a professional context. Proceed, Vivian said. The vote was called. The count was taken. 2/3 majority. Dr. Vivian Caldwell, suspended from the company she had founded, effective immediately, pending independent review. Up slowly, with full control of the pace of it, looked around the table one final time. Not quickly. Look Fiss in turn. Some looked away, some held her gaze with the blankness of people who have committed to a decision and intend to maintain it regardless of discomfort. Deirdre Okafor, the youngest board member, met her eyes and held them, her expression unreadable but not comfortable. Not comfortable at all. Not removing me from my company, Vivian said. It's the same voice, the same register as the lobby, as the staff gathering. Every other moment in the past 24 hours when someone had expected her to be smaller than she was. You are removing yourselves from history, and you will understand that difference very soon. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Men she knew. She did not make it easy for them to avoid knowing her back. She picked up her portfolio. Hen walked to the door at the pace of someone who has decided to leave and is leaving on their own terms. The hallway, Simone fell into step beside her. They moved. Sim said quietly, is exactly the way we needed them to. Vivian didn't answer right away. She was thinking about 1998, a folding table, a room that smelled of dental antiseptic on Tuesdays. A clause written in plain language inside dry procedural language, placed where it would survive restructurings without anyone understanding what it was actually for. She was thinking about a man named Arthur Caldwell, who had believed that language was the one thing no one could take from you. Who had taught his daughter to build things people didn't know how to dismantle. She was thinking about how long she had been building this particular thing. 26 years, and how it was finally time to use it. Schedule the shareholder meeting, she said. 48 hours. Simone was already dialing. The folding chairs ran out at 6:45. Someone found more in a storage room down the hall, the kind used for Tuesday night bingo and Saturday afternoon grief support, and the quarterly meetings of a neighborhood association that had been fighting the same zoning dispute for 11 years. Carried them in by 2s and 3s and set them up along the walls and in the back corridor, and still people stood. Lined the perimeter of the room with their coats folded over their arms, and their phones already raised, already recording, already sending the stream to people who couldn't be there in person. 430 people inside a space designed for 250. Online, Petra Wash's technical team had confirmed the count at 6:58, 2 minutes before the start, 117,000 viewer across 4 platforms, the number climbing fast enough that the counter had stopped looking like a number and started looking like a river. Vivian stood in the back hallway and listened to the room fill through the wall. The sound of it was particular. Not the sound of a crowd waiting for entertainment, the sound of a crowd that has decided something matters and has come to be present for it. Low, sustained, the sound of weather moving in from a direction everyone in the room already knew. Simone appeared at her elbow. And 31,000 online, she said. And local news has 3 cameras at the back. I told them no exclusives, full footage available to all outlets or none. Agreed. Vivian looked at the door to the main hall. She thought about her father, not the Savannah Highway. Earlier, a Saturday morning when she was 11, sitting at the kitchen table with homework spread out around her while he graded papers at the other end. He had looked up at some point without preamble and said, when you walk into a room and the room doesn't want you there, Viv, you have 2 choices. You can make yourself smaller so they're more comfortable, or you can take up exactly as much space as you're owed and let them adjust. Back down at his papers. I recommend the second one. It's harder in the short term and better in every other way. Been 11 and had understood it imperfectly. She was 62 and had been practicing it ever since. 2 minutes, Simone said. Vivian straightened, walked to the door. Rosa Mae Jenkins was already on stage when Vivian came in from the side. Already seated. 6 notebooks arranged on the table in front of her with the deliberate placement of someone who has thought about this moment and decided how it should look. Stacked, spread out, visible each one. A separate document of a separate period of years, their different covers and different states of wear telling their own story about how long this had been going on. She was wearing her housekeeping uniform, not because anyone had asked her to, not because it was required. She had called Vivian at 7 that morning to explain the decision, and Vivian had listened without interrupting, and Rosa Mae had said, I want people to see what I am. What I've been, what I was wearing every day in that building, while the people running it decisions I wasn't invited to weigh in on. I want them to look at this uniform and understand that the person wearing it saw everything and wrote it all down. The uniform said, every day, for 35 years, and I noticed. The room went quiet when Rosa Mae stood. In waves, the way quiet moves through a crowd when something real is about to begin, and people can feel the difference between that and everything that isn't. gripped the sides of the podium, and she began. My name is Rosamay Jenkins, clear, not loud. The voice of someone who has learned that clarity carries farther than volume. I worked at the Caldwell Grand Hotel for 35 years. Started as a housekeeper in January of 1989 when I was 32 years old. I worked my way to head of housekeeping. For every one of those 35 years, I kept records. She opened the first notebook, turned it so the room could see the handwriting. This is June 1989. A family was turned away from a room that was available. I knew the room was available because I had cleaned it that morning and checked the board. Clerk told them the reservation had been lost. She turned a page. I wrote it down. Quiet in the room. Salute. This is 1997. A woman named Rosa Zarvega. She'd been with us 8 years. She was passed over for team lead 3 times. Third time, the position went to a man hired 4 months earlier with no performance reviews on file. I found out what he was paid when he started. The payroll sheet was left in the copy room, which happened more often than management knew, and I wrote down the difference. She closed that notebook, opened the next. Rosario filed a complaint. The complaint was marked resolved. She left the company the following spring. I wrote that down too. The murmur that moved through the room was not surprise. It was recognition. This is 2003. 4 months of patterns I tracked in room assignments. Guests with certain kinds of names were being assigned to interior rooms, when exterior rooms with better views were available. Always, just with enough consistency that when I tracked the dates and names side by side, the pattern was visible. She slid that notebook toward the edge of the table. I reported it. I was told I was reading too much into standard room assignment logistics. She opened the 4th notebook. This covers 2014 through 2018. There is a section in the middle. You'll see the tabs where I document guest complaints I personally witnessed being filed and then watched disappear. Had brief access to the feedback platform through the housekeeping scheduling system. I saw a complaint come in. I wrote down the reference number, the guest's name, and what they had reported. I checked my checkbook back 2 weeks later. A pause, long enough to breathe. Every one of those complaints was closed. Resolution code applied. No investigation record. No contact with the guest who filed it. She looked up at the room. 430 people who had come on a Friday evening to sit in folding chairs and listen. Kept writing it down, she said, every time, because I believed I needed to believe that someday some would care enough to listen. Someday the notebooks would have somewhere to go. She reached into the pocket of her uniform and placed a single folded sheet of paper on the table. 5 years ago, I found this in the records room while searching for maintenance logs. It had been misfiled between 2 housekeeping inventory reports from 2018. She unfolded it. It is a memo dated March 14, 2019, written by the then general manager of the Caldwell Grand to the Corporate Compliance Division of Caldwell Hospitality Group. Documents a systematic pattern of discriminatory guest treatment under the supervision of the hotel's manager. It names incidents. It cites dates. It includes complaint reference numbers for complaints that were filed and subsequently closed without investigation. She held it up. Bottom of this memo is a signature line, received and reviewed. Carolyn Hargrove, Board Chair, March 20, 2019. The room did not stay quiet after that. The noise that moved through it was not dramatic, not the noise of a crowd being told something designed to produce reaction. It was the noise of people receiving information that reframes everything that came before it, the sound of context arriving, of a shape becoming clear that had always been there, just unlit. Simone stepped to the podium when the room had settled enough to hear her. Person who chaired the board of this company was informed in writing of a systematic pattern of racial discrimination at the flagship property 5 years and 6 months ago. She signed the acknowledgement. She filed the document. A pause. She took no action. One more beat. That ends tonight. Brixton Hale walked to the microphone without a disguise. He had thought about it, had spent 2 days thinking about whether to use a screen, a voice modulator, some technical middle ground that would let him say what needed to be said while keeping some distance from the saying of it. He had decided against it because his grandmother had cleaned hotel rooms for 42 years, and no one had recorded the things that happened to her in those rooms. If he was going to stand in a room with 400 people and 130,000 watching online and say the things he needed to say, he was going to do it with his face visible and his name attached. He was 26. He was more nervous than he had ever been in his life. He was exactly where he needed to be. My name is Brixton Hale. Until this week, I was a front desk associate at the Caldwell Grand Hotel. The room was very still. I was trained by Derek Stanton. The training was never written down. It was communicated in looks, in comments, in the way he would appear at the front desk. Certain guests approached and made clear, without saying it in language that could be quoted, what he expected to happen. What additional verification to request, which rooms to assign, how to handle a complaint that he didn't want escalated. He paused. It be what it was. I told myself I was following protocol. I told myself it wasn't my decision to make. I told myself a lot of things that I have spent the past 3 days understanding were not true. He looked at the camera directly. What I was doing was participating, and I am here tonight because that is no longer something I'm willing to do. Wash stepped forward and connected her laptop to the display screen behind the stage. The footage you are about to see is the unedited security recording from the Caldwell Grand Hotel. Tuesday morning, all cameras, all angles, full resolution. This is what the building system recorded. Compare it with what has been circulating on social media. The screen filled the lobby of the Caldwell Grand in the flat, truthful light of a Tuesday morning. The timestamp in the corner, 9:31 a. Vivian arriving, the interaction at the front desks. Brixton's face visible, his behavior visible, the dynamic of the exchange visible in a way that was uncomfortable to watch and was meant to be. Derek arriving, the escalation. His hand across the counter. The slaps, the sound of it came through the speakers, and the room absorbed it in complete silence. Vivian, standing, not falling, not breaking, one hand still holding her phone, and Rosa May crossing the lobby floor with the unhurried deliberateness of someone who has made an irreversible decision. When the footage ended, Brixton returned to the microphone. The edited version that circulated online was created the night before Dr. Caldwell arrived at the hotel. He pulled up Petra's metadata analysis on the screen. This is the file creation timestamp. 4:47 p.m. Monday. The incident occurred Tuesday morning at 9:47 a.m. He let the math sit in the room. The video was made before the incident it claims to document. He brought up a second document. These are internal staff communications. I have redacted names other than Derek Stanton's, but the communications themselves are complete and unaltered. They include specific written instructions for how to handle guests based on their apparent race, given in language that was designed to be deniable in isolation and was perfectly clear in context. He looked at the room. I received these instructions. I followed some of them. I am telling you that tonight because the alternative is continuing to be quiet about it, and I've understood in the past 3 days what that silence costs. Back from the microphone. The room held its response for a moment, that particular held breath before a crowd decides how to release what it's been given. It released, not applause, something more complicated than applause. The sound of 400 people responding to information they needed to hear from someone who had paid a price to give it. Vivian walked to the center of the stage. No podium. She had asked them to remove it 2 hours before the event. She wanted to stand in the open, visible from every angle, with nothing between her and the room. Navy blue dress. The same one. She had chosen it deliberately that morning, standing in her closet in the early light, understanding that it had become something more than a dress in the past 4 days, had become, in the way that objects sometimes do during significant events, a record of what had happened in it. The mark on her cheek was almost gone. She had not covered it. She stood in the middle of the stage and let the room look at her for a moment. Or portable 142,000 online. See exactly what was there. A 62-year-old woman in a navy blue dress standing in a community center in southwest Atlanta on a Friday night, asking nothing of the people watching except their attention. Then she spoke. My father's name was Arthur Caldwell. The room was so quiet that the words seemed to reach every corner without effort. He was a professor of literature at Morris Brown College. He read books before bed every night. He pressed his suit carefully for any occasion that mattered. He believed that language was the one thing no one could take from you. I said circumstances, not other people, not the particular cruelties that history had arranged for people who looked like him. She breathed. The summer I was 8 years old, my father drove our family 8 hours through Georgia to visit relatives. Stopped for the night at a hotel outside Savannah. He was wearing his best suit. He had a reservation. Everything correctly. And the man behind the desk looked at him and told him there was no vacancy. Pause. The vacancy sign was lit outside. There were available rooms. My father knew this, and the man behind the desk knew my father knew this, and neither of them said so. Room didn't move. My father walked back to the car. He didn't explain what had happened. My brothers were asleep, my mother already understood, and I was 8 years old, watching his face. We slept in the car that night, and I lay awake in the back seat watching my father sit behind the steering wheel and look out at the dark. Rage. He didn't cry. He sat there with the particular stillness of a man who has encountered something he cannot fix tonight, but has not decided to accept. She let it be quiet for a moment. I built this hotel. I built this company because of that night. Out of anger, though the anger is real and has never fully left. Out of a decision made by an 8-year-old in the back seat of a Pontiac that when she was old stuff and capable enough, she would build a door that opened. For everyone, without the particular unspoken conditions that had closed the door on her father, she looked around the room. Put my father's name on that building because he deserved to have his name on a door that would never close the way that door in Savannah closed. Was the point of all of it. Every decision I made in 26 years of building this company, every argument with contractors and investors and board members, every hour of work, it was also in service of that one thing. Her voice didn't change, didn't rise. A man hit me in that lobby on Tuesday morning. Hit me because he had been given to understand by his family, by the system that had protected him for 15 years, by the shareholders who had decided that his family's name and their financial relationship mattered more than what was happening in the building every day, that he could. I was the kind of woman you could put your hands on without consequence. A beat, what he didn't account for. What none of them accounted for is that I wrote the rules of this game in 1998. I wrote them knowing that a day like Tuesday would come eventually. My father taught me that some doors close for reasons no one will say out loud, and the only answer to that is to build something those reasons cannot touch. She looked at the camera. Tomorrow morning, I am calling a special shareholder meeting under Article 7, Section 12 of the Caldwell Hospitality Founding Agreement. I am presenting this evidence to the shareholders of this company, and I am asking them to do what the board of this company failed to do when they received a memo in March of 2019 and filed it. My father never got to stay in a hotel like Le Caldwell Grand. He died in 2003, 2 years after we opened. Came to the opening. He stood in the lobby and looked up at the light coming through the atrium, and he said, Viv, this is something. This is really something. Her voice held. I built for him. I'm going to make sure it stays what it was built to be. For him, for Rosa May, for every guest who filed a complaint and received a resolution code and nothing else. For every person who has ever stood at a door and been told without words that it wasn't for them. She looked out at the room. Not in this house. Not ever again. Vivian arrived at 8:45. You arrive first. You know the room. You let them walk into a space you've already made yours. Neutral ground, Simone had insisted. Somewhere outside the Caldwell corporate office where Carolyn still held procedural authority. Long table, 22 shareholders in person, the rest by proxy. Court reporter, 2 independent certifications attorneys, 3 media cameras permitted to document but not broadcast live. Richard Stanton arrived at 8:53 with 2 family proxies and the lead attorney, Garrett. 71 years old, the founding shareholder who had brought money and conditions to Vivian's table in 1996. He moved through the room with the bearing of a man who has expected a certain range of power for so long that expectation and reality had become indistinguishable. He didn't look at Vivian. Carolyn Hargrove arrived at 8:58, silver hair, dark jacket, the composure she had been maintaining since Tuesday, through the board vote, through the memo on the conference on table, through all of it. At the head of the table, she didn't look at Vivian either. Simone presented for 51 minutes. Rosa May's notebooks first, not the testimony but the documentation itself. 35 years of complaint reference numbers cross-referenced against resolution records, staff incident reports filed and marked closed. The pattern visible only when you laid everything out at once and stepped back far enough to see the shape. Derek's internal emails, the staff group chat, instructions in writing directing discriminatory practices, deniable in isolation, explicit in accumulation. 2019 memo, full screen, Robert Franklin's measured language, and at the bottom, Carolyn Hargrove, board chair, March 21, 2019. Carolyn looked at it on the screen. Her hands were folded on the table, the knuckles white, just the knuckles, everything else held completely still. The metadata analysis, then the unedited lobby footage. The sound of the slap came through the conference room speakers. Several shareholders flinched. One put her hand briefly over her mouth. The motion before this body, Simone said when the footage ended, is to invoke Article 7, Section 12 and call a special shareholder vote on the suspension of voting rights for any party found complicit in the documented discriminatory practices. Garrett was on his feet immediately. Article 7, Section 12 has never been tested in. Its applicability is established by the plain language of the provision, reviewed and approved by 3 separate legal teams at the 1998 execution, and reaffirmed in both the 2007 and 2014 restructurings. All 3 reviewed documents. Copies are available. Garrett sat down. Richard Stanton leaned toward him. Garrett leaned back. Something moved across Richard's face, the expression of a man encountering the first room in a long time where the arrangement of power doesn't favor him. Bullets distributed. The room quiet in the way of permanent decisions being made. The votes came in. The certification attorneys reviewed the count. Motion carried. Stanton family voting rights. Suspended. Effective immediately. All agreements contingent on Stanton family approval. Held in abeyance. The Harrington Capital acquisition finished. Richard Stanton stood, not to speak, just stood, then picked up his jacket and walked to the door. He stopped. Vivian, for the first time since entering the room, she looked back, not with anger, not with performance. Just the clear, finished look of someone who has fully understood something and is done with it. He left. 2 police officers entered from the side door as the room moved into recess. The arrest warrant for Derek Stanton had been issued the previous afternoon. Assault in the 2nd degree and obstruction of justice, the latter charge supported by his documented attempt to access the security system after Vivian had terminated his credentials. The officers had been waiting in the building. Simone's timing after the vote in front of the shareholders so that legal and corporate consequences are as a single fact rather than 2 separate events to be managed independently. They found Derek in the corridor outside the main hall, following the proceedings on his phone. He looked up when they approached. Stood there a moment in his black suit in a hotel hallway on a Saturday morning while the full weight of what he had set in motion settled around him. Stanton, you're under arrest. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. His attorneys moved immediately. Garrett appeared and joined the cluster of voices. Derek stood in the middle of all of it and said nothing. Carolyn submitted her resignation during that same recess. A single-page handwritten letter delivered to the certification attorneys. No statement, no transition request, just the letter, witnessed, entered into the record. She didn't come back into the conference hall. Vivian watched her through the corridor window, a silver-haired woman in a dark jacket walking toward the elevator with the particular posture of someone who has just put down something they couldn't carry much further anyway. Sat with that for the length of the recess, then turned back to the work. Because there was still work to do. There was always still work to do, because the point was never the battle, the point was what you built after it. The doors opened at 9 a.m. on a Thursday in December, and the light came through the atrium the way it always had, warm and diffuse, falling at the angle she had calculated and argued for, and finally gotten. The same light her father had stood under in 2001, the same light on a different morning in what was now finally the hotel it had always been meant to be. Rosa Jenkins was general manager, 2nd floor office, east-facing. Window looking directly down over the lobby. She had chosen it for that window specifically, out of 3 options, because she had spent 35 years looking up at the people who ran this building and wanted whatever time remained to look down and see what was actually happening. To manage from a distance, to witness up close. There was a difference between those 2 things, and Rosa Asmay had spent most of her working life understanding it from the wrong side. She arrived every morning before any member of her staff, not 30 minutes early, an hour. She walked the floor the way she had always walked it, with the attention of someone who sees what is actually there, rather than what the paperwork says ought to be, but she walked it now as the person responsible for what she found. The right leg still caught on the turn between the elevator bank and the main corridor. She had refused, without deliberation, when Vivian raised the possibility of adjusting the floor plan. Leave it, she had said. Vivian had waited. It's a reminder of what this place was and what it isn't anymore. Every morning I catch on that turn, I remember both things at once. The forgetting would be the real loss. Brixton Hale worked 2 doors down. He had written most of the new guest relations handbook over 6 weeks. Specific where other handbooks were vague, naming things that happened rather than circling around them. He had written it from the inside, from the knowledge of someone who had received the unwritten training and understood its mechanisms because he had operated them. Specificity made it honest in the way only first-person honesty can be. Rosa May had read the full draft twice, made 19 marginal notes, and called him on a Saturday to tell him the complaint escalation section was the most accurate thing she'd read in 35 years of watching complaints go nowhere. You don't have to say anything, she had told him when he went quiet. Just make sure the next version keeps it. Near the front desk at eye level, specifically at eye level, because Vivian had measured, a small bronze plaque, the Rosa Mae Jenkins Hospitality Scholarship, for students who were told this world wasn't built for them. Rosa Mae had argued against her name. Put someone else's on it, she had said. Someone we lost. Someone who deserved better and isn't here to see this. The second conversation had gone differently. Your name is on it, Vivian had said, because you stayed. Not because staying was easy or because it was rewarded. Wasn't for most of those 35 years. Name is on it because you kept records when no one asked you to and no one was going to thank you for it. Because you wrote it down in 6 notebooks and locked them in Alzheimer and kept showing up every morning to a place that treated you like you didn't matter. Kind of staying is what made everything else possible. That is not sentiment. That is accurate accounting. Rosa Mae had considered this for a long moment. All right, she had said, but make the scholarship text larger than my name. The point isn't me. The point is what it opens. Plaque reflected that exactly. On the morning of the reopening, Vivian stood in the lobby before the first guests arrived. Just her and Rosa Mae, no media, no photographer, just 2 women who had each given significant portions of their lives to this building, one to build it from nothing, one to survive it from within, standing in the light at 8:45 with the white and yellow flowers near the concierge desk releasing their scent into the still air. White and yellow, her mother's preference, built into all 14 Caldwell properties without explanation. Her mother had believed a hotel lobby should like something living, something with roots. Vivian had carried that forward without examining why until the 3rd property, when she understood she was passing on something she had been given. Rosa Mae asked. Yes, Vivian said. Rosa Mae looked at her sideways a little. Vivian said. Rosa made a sound that was almost a laugh. Low and genuine, the laugh of someone reclaiming a right that had been deferred too long. Good, she said. The ones who aren't nervous don't understand what they've built. Back to her inspection, Vivian watched her go, the catch in her stride at the corridor turn, the straightening immediately after, the authority of someone finally given keys she'd helped build from ceased inside, one recorded incident at a time. 9, the doors opened. The family came through at 9:47, a couple perhaps late 60s, him in a carefully pressed blazer. Her in a dress the color of late autumn, amber and rust, a thread of gold, a small enamel brooch at the collar, hair pinned with the precision of someone who had decided that morning this day deserved that attention. 3 grandchildren trailed behind with rolling suitcases, carrying on an argument that had clearly started before they left home. The woman's shoulders were tight. Vivian recognized it immediately. The particular compression of a body that has learned from experience to calibrate its expectations downward before walking through a door like this one. The preparation, the waiting to see which version of the room it was going to be. Adiazi was at the front desk. 2 months with the company. Rosa Mae had flagged her in the first week. This one understands what the work actually is. She looked up as the family crossed the lobby and said their name before they reached the counter. Mr. and Mrs. Beaumont. Warm, real, not performed. Welcome to the Caldwell Grand. We've been looking forward to your arrival, Mrs. Beaumont stopped, a small stop, the stop of someone who expected to have to introduce themselves and has instead been met. Something in her face shifted, a small opening, a window raised an inch. I see this is a special trip, Adeze said, looking at the screen with the attention of someone actually reading it. Our grandson, Marcus. He turns 9 tomorrow. 9. Adeze found the right child immediately. Not by guessing, by looking, by seeing Marcus specifically. Marcus, we have a tradition here for birthday guests. It's specific to you. Would you like to know what it is? The child's face opened entirely, the full, unguarded openness of a 9-year-old receiving something unexpected and good. And Miss Beaumont's shoulders came down, not instantly. In stages. The slow release of something held against expectation for a long time, the exhale of body beginning tentatively to believe it was allowed to be at ease. The door had opened, actually opened, without the conditions she had been waiting to discover. Vivian stood very still and watched it happen. This is what I was building, not the marble and the atrium light, this specific moment, this woman's body releasing what it had been holding for years. Dad, you would have seen exactly what this was. Mrs. Beaumont turned, some instinct, and looked across the lobby. Found Vivian standing near the concierge desk. Recognition moved across her face slowly then completely. The footage, the community center. The woman in the navy blue dress saying, "Not in this house, not ever again." She crossed the lobby. Her husband came with her. The children had already followed a daze toward the birthday tradition, their argument suspended by the prospect of discovery. She stopped in front of Vivian and reached for her hands. Both of them, the grip of someone who has lived long enough to know that certain communications require contact. Dr. Caldwell said with care, more than the name. "I recognized you. I'm glad you came," Vivian said. "We talked about weather too," she said. "Everything we saw, whether it was different now or whether it had only changed its language." She glanced at her husband, who nodded. "We needed to see for ourselves. I understand that. When I was young, hotels like this had a way of making you feel like you were asking for something you hadn't earned. Like the door opened because it was legally required to, not because anyone inside wanted you there." She looked at the lobby around her. The light. A Daisy's voice reaching them from across the room, saying something that made Marcus laugh without reservation. "You never quite stopped waiting to find out what the conditions were." Vivian was quiet. "My father never got to stay somewhere like this." Steady voice, the steadiness of years of practice carrying something without being leveled by it, not once in his life. Worked hard. He was a good man. He would have loved a place like it. A pause. He just never got to know it. Vivian's throat tightened. She thought about Arthur Caldwell at 43, walking back to the car with the same posture he had walked in with. She thought about him at 73, standing in this lobby, looking up at the atrium light, saying, "Viv, this is something." She thought about the 2 years between that opening and his death, the years she had spent since wishing she had built it faster. "My father either," she said. "Not while he was alive." Mrs. Beaumont looked at her. "He knew you built it for him, though." Certainty of someone who understands from both sides how that particular love travels. Wordless, permanent, understood without being spoken. Whatever else happened, he knew. Vivian looked up at the name above the entrance, the Caldwell Grand, same name. Same reason it was there. "I think he did," she said. "I think he understood." Mrs. Beaumont squeezed her hands once, deliberate as punctuation, and let go. Turned to find Marcus, who could be heard somewhere near the elevator bank, his voice rising with the specific delight of a child whose morning has exceeded its expectations. Rosa May appeared at Vivian's shoulder, quiet, the way she had appeared in this same lobby 3 months ago when the earring was on the floor and the room was holding its breath. She simply arrived and stood there in the way she had always stood, not asking, not explaining, just present. They stood together and watched the morning move through the space that they had built and broken and rebuilt. The family at the elevator bank. Marcus holding something small, deciding whether it met his standards, then deciding that it did. Azaze already moving to the next arriving guests, the Sishini saying a name before the counter was reached. The light coming through the atrium, the white and yellow flowers, the scholarship plaque text larger than the name, exactly as requested. "Good first day?" asked. Vivian looked at all of it. "If good first day," she said. Rosa May nodded once. To work. Outside, Atlanta moved at its ordinary pace, indifferent as cities is are to what happens inside any one building on any one morning. Inside the Caldwell Grand, in the warm December light, with Rosa May Jenkins' name on a plaque and Arthur Caldwell's name above the door, something that had been closed for a very long time, was open.